I walked around for days in a familiar place. This time I finally let myself own every small feeling. I walked around for days in a familiar place. This time I finally let myself own every small feeling. There was a one who got away. There was a first for everything. Never a second guessing I was right where I should be. Do you know what I mean? Do you still feel part of something loud? Are you such a different person now? A dream that never was, an idea you think you come from. All my idea you can't have the day. I had it figured out the way it really is. And growing up, we've added just too much complexity. Friends at the show in '95, miss every one of them. But there's a moment that you die, or you move on to live. Every one of us did. Do you still feel part of something loud? Are you such a different person now? A dream that never was, an idea you think you come from. All night when you can't look at the game. I had what I had, and goddamn, I would change not a single thing. So smile, wave, then let go. Do you still feel part of something loud? Are you such a different person now? A dream that never was, an idea you think you come from. All night when you can't look at the day. When you can't look at the day. When you can't look at the day.
Good evening, soon to be good morning, and I want to thank you guys for tuning in so late to Bold Like a Leopard. We're going to go through a few topics today. First of all, I need to add a camera. I forgot I got rid of one, so apologize for that. And now we're going to have to also, here, let me minimize it for now. So, we're going to talk today about a number of topics, some of them more lighthearted, other ones not as much. And it really is, I think, going to be a very rough year in the news in general because a lot of the economic news, especially, just is not moving in the right direction. So, my hope is that this time next year, of course, we're going into, if you're from, my people, if you're Jewish, we have a new year that just happened a few days ago. It's called Rosh Hashanah. So my hope is that once the new year comes next year, we'll have much better news. But I've never been really an optimist. So you might want to hang around people more positive than me. Anyway, so the topics today include my latest story, which is about the former, or he is the current Attorney General of Pennsylvania, and he's likely going to be the next governor, Josh Shapiro, and how he tried to prosecute a number of prison guards in that state, and the prosecution was simply a failure. Okay, he got a couple to plead no contest, and there were at least two acquittals. One person he had to drop charges against. So these are this is a problem that I find very frustrating. That often the big stories don't really get much coverage, and you have to dig for them. So I found this. It was published, of course, by local Pennsylvania media, but only really in Lackawanna County, which is one of the more rural counties of Pennsylvania. So their news doesn't really penetrate into the broader media. We're also going to go into the big upset in Brazil. Now, it's not a real upset, okay, in the truest sense, because we're not talking about a real victory, but we're talking about defying expectations. So, Brazil is heading to a presidential runoff, meaning that the second round didn't have, or first, sorry, the first round did not have enough of a decisive margin of victory where the winner got more than 50%. So they're going to have a runoff. But it's actually going to be closer than was expected because some were saying, yeah, there's going to be a runoff, but really it's a foregone conclusion who's going to win in the end. Now it's becoming a little bit more suspenseful. And finally, we are going to address a scandal with Republicans, which I'm hoping isn't really true, but it does seem to be something that is in keeping with a pattern of things that have been leaked about the life of Herschel Walker, who's the Republican nominee for Senate in Georgia, for U.S. Senate. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So where do I begin? I think I will begin with this story that is a little bit more from pop culture, and that is the story of Billy Eichner and his frustration with box office failure of his film Bros. Now, apparently they were expecting bad numbers that were around $10 million in its opening weekend. And uh, I would have thought that $10 million would actually be not a bad sum for what's termed to be a romantic comedy, meaning that special effects and all these other expensive production uh, features they weren't really coming into play for that for that type of movie, right? You normally expect a romantic comedy to be a low budget affair that doesn't necessarily involve too much of an outlay, but the thing is, there's been so much promotion of this movie that really nobody wants to see that, yeah, $10 million definitely would have been a flop. At the end, it was $4.8 million for Bros. And Billy Eichner actually tweeted out, and he said, everyone who isn't a homophobic weirdo should go see Bros tonight. You will have a blast. And it is special and uniquely powerful to see this particular story on a big screen, especially for queer folks who don't get this opportunity often. I love this movie so much. Go Bros. So this was um, this was a film by Judd Apatow. Now, so far as I know, Judd Apatow is straight. He's not gay, but he's a big comedic writer, and he's been behind. I mean, let me go through some of the films because I don't want to be wrong, but I do think he was behind Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which I think was hilarious. romantic comedy. But he's been behind a number of big films. 40 Year Old Version for sure. Um, Let me see. This is 40. Funny People wasn't that funny in my opinion. Knocked Up, yeah, that was a huge one. And yeah, he was the director of Superbad. So in the late 2000s, and Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Get Him to the Greek, in the late 2000s and early 2010s, there wasn't a person who could write a better comedy film than Judd Apatow. And I'm sorry to say that the guy has lost his mojo by being involved in this stinker. Why? Because, look, um, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why this romantic comedy didn't make it very far at the box office, okay? The reason is because in order for you to get a romantic comedy to succeed at the box office, you need jokes that hit along as wide of a segment of the audience as possible. And really, men will go to a romantic comedy with their significant other, who's a woman usually, and it's called a romantic comedy because you need to get the like. There's only two things that will get the man to go. Okay, they're not there for the romance. So either it has to be hilarious, or the woman has to be very attractive for straight guys to go. Now, um, they geared this movie towards gay guys, and the reason I know it's geared towards gay guys is because they marketed this to be a completely LGBTQ cast film, which is something that, if you think about rhetoric in terms of identity politics, when you represent certain roles in film, people who are on the left are saying, well, we need representation and we need it to be authentic. We need people who play the roles to be representative of the people who they are portraying. So the very premise of the film was that, well, everybody in the film is going to be not straight. So then why would straight people go to see it if that's the way that you look at production of arts, that in order to get people interested, you need somebody in the film in order to represent the audience, the people that are there, and that's the whole idea behind diversity in any field, that you need people to buy in by being represented in it. So that was a reason, for example, that people were saying there's not enough black superheroes, there weren't enough Latina superheroes in or Latinx superheroes in Marvel, or that you didn't have people who were of X or Y community, you didn't have transgender, you didn't have so all of this was their rhetoric for so many years, that in order to draw in and include people, you had to have them represented within the film that they were talking about. Now, I will tell you that that's always been complete nonsense. Okay, you've so judging by that criteria, it would mean that black people were never interested in any form of art up until there were black people appearing in them, right? And therefore, you wouldn't see black people want to play in sports that they were prohibited from being a part of, like baseball, up until 1947, or basketball. Well, basketball I don't think really had strict separation. So, but yeah, there were teams that certainly excluded them, such as the Kentucky Wildcats, up until I think like 1966. So the whole idea that, well, we are not going to see people want to buy in and be a part of something because they don't see themselves in it has always been ridiculous. Same thing with rock music, right? So originally, rock music was something that was a hybrid of obviously blues and jazz and well, R&B, jazz, and also country music and some of these other more folk music um, styles, and yet you had people from all different cultures buying in, including Mexican Americans, people like Richie Valens. So I've never bought that whole line that people don't buy into a form of art simply because they're not represented. But the people who